I hope that you're staying warm. I hope that you have time off of work, time to spend with family and friends, all that good stuff. How many of you out there have already decorated for the holidays? I know that people are putting up their trees earlier and earlier. It's just great to get in the spirit, I guess. I still really try to not put up a single tree or decoration for the holidays until the weekend after Thanksgiving. It's just tradition. It's what I've always done with my family. So really the Friday after Thanksgiving is when we start getting the lights out and all the Christmas totes and all of that good stuff. So let me know in the comments in the live chat or the comments below if you've already started or if you're waiting patiently like me, semi-patiently. I have some inspiration for you today for decorating your tree. So if you're like me and you're waiting to put it up, you might have some time before the weekend hits to do one of these three tree skirt projects that I'm going to present to you today. But before we get started, how many of you out there are already registered for our New Year's Eve sew-along? That's right, we are partnering with Sally Tomato again this year to bring you the Smith organizer pattern. This is a brand new pattern that was created specifically for our New Year's Eve sew-along. And I have two next to me right here. I absolutely love this pattern. It comes together really quickly and easily. This is the non-embroidery option. So if you don't have an embroidery machine, I'm going to teach you how to use decorative stitches or straight stitches like I have here. And we will still be personalizing the organizer using really pretty sulky threads. Traditionally, this has been a sew-along event. And once again, we'll be sewing for 4 hours starting at noon Eastern time. So it's really like a noon Year's Eve sew-along. And that gives you plenty of time to still go out that night or celebrate with your friends and family. And we have a little project that you can do during the day. So join us 12 p.m. Eastern time. We will be sewing along until 4 p.m. And, in the past, it's been kind of difficult to keep up and actually sew along with the instructors. And, I try to sew along as well. And sometimes I get hung up on something. Your machine can do funny things, especially when you're celebrating for New Year's Eve at the same time. If you reach a snag in the project or need to rethread your machine or something, you can get a little off track. Well, this year, the project is really doable in this 4-hour span of time. The only thing that might hang you up a little bit is the machine embroidery, because we are also partnering with Urban Threads and Embroidery Library, who have generously supplied everyone who registers with 5 beautiful embroidery designs that you can choose from to personalize your Smith organizer. So like I said, you don't have to have an embroidery machine to join us on New Year's Eve. I will be going through the non-embroidery option as well. But if you are going to do the embroidery option, I suggest checking out those designs before we all come together on New Year's Eve. Once you register, you will have access to all of the designs as well as the Smith organizer pattern. Absolutely free. It's about $40 worth of good stuff just for registering for the event. So I suggest going through those designs. There's a beautiful butterfly like you see here. There is another butterfly. The butterfly you see here is an Embroidery Library design. There's also a Urban Threads butterfly design that you can choose from. There is a really cool tree that looks really great on the brown version. Lots of different shades of brown and tree leaves and all this stuff. There's also what is called the Stamps border. And it is a really cool design if you're making this for somebody as a gift and they love to travel. This is a really good unisex, gender neutral project. So Any gender would really love this for a gift. But the stamp design also features, I think, 5 or 6 brown colored threads, and each stamp is an outline using a different one of those colors. So you kind of go from darkest to lightest color, and the stamps fit right above that strap that goes across the Smith organizer. So it's a really great embellishment. And then they also, the good people at Urban Threads and Embroidery Library, they digitized and designed a phrase design for us to use specifically for this event. It's called Enjoy the Journey. And you'll get that design into colorways, so you can either use it on your blue colorway kit or the brown colorway kit. And this is the design. Let me get this out of the way here. Enjoy the journey. Really pretty. Love it. This is actually 2 different shades of the teal threads. It's kind of hard to see. Whoops. On camera here, but 2 different thread colors, and then the brown is 2 different shades of brown. So once you open up your Smith organizer, here's that strap that goes across the top. You'll see this nice zippered pocket that you have on the front. The center is open, but it has some fold over elastic so you can slip a notebook inside. And then this side has all your card keepers, your cord organizers, and then I sewed a line down this piece to have 2 additional pockets for a phone or whatever. And then this also doubles as a padded pocket that you can slip your tablet into. It fits about an 11-inch tablet. And then the whole thing folds up really nicely, and then you simply tuck your front flap into the little strap and carry it on with you on a flight, on a road trip, or just keep it in your sewing room, keep it in your office, and it organizes all of your things quite nicely. So please join me and Jessica Barrera from Sally Tomato as we take you through this exciting, fun event on New Year's Eve. Okay, so let's get to our tree skirts. And, you know, when we are ready to decorate, the last thing we want to do is spend a huge amount of time in our sewing room updating our tree skirt. Am I right? So these come together relatively easily. And what I love about each one of these tree skirt projects is they are scrap busters. So you can dive into your fabric stash, bring out all those holiday fabrics you had left over from last year, or grab some fat quarter bundles, and you can get to the sewing in no time. So the first tree skirt I want to bring to you is what's called our Speedy spiral tree skirt. And this was kind of a mashup project. It's actually been on the Sulky website for quite a few years, and it's one of our most popular pages and projects at sulky.com. So I wanted to show it to you in case you haven't seen it over the years. You can see all of these patches that you sew together make this kind of spiral effect once you sew the entire tree skirt together. And then just a ruffled trim was added to the edge to bring a fabric print into the mix and give it a little bit of pop. And I love the color choice of this tree skirt. You don't have to go super traditional with the reds and greens. You could do all shades of red. You could do all shades of creams and whites and metallic-y type fabrics as well, depending on your decor and the ornaments that you choose to put on your tree. So like I said, it comes together rather quickly. You do kind of this strip piecing method, and then you use this great ruler to cut out the wedges that you will sew together to create your spiral tree skirt. So all the information for how to make this, I'm just giving you a little overview because I want to get to the tree skirt that I made most recently and explain that in more detail. But all the instructions for this spiral tree skirt are at sulky.com, and I linked directly to the tutorial in the description of today's post. So if you want all the instructions, the cutting dimensions, where to get this ruler, all of those good things, you can find that in the description of today's post. click on that little see more button and the whole description will pop out with all the links for everything I'm talking about today. So after you piece together your wedges and sew them together in your circular shape, you'll add that ruffle trim to the bottom, and you simply create a fabric strip and then fold it in half. So you have that folded edge along the bottom of the ruffle, and then you're going to sew the ruffled edge to your outer tree skirt edge. Flip it to the right side, and you can even top stitch that down so it lays nice and flat as well. Oh, I forgot to mention this. This actually happens first, I believe, or maybe it's lined. It is lined with your ruffle tucked in between the layers, and that's going to conceal that raw edge of your ruffle and all the raw edges of everything that you just pieced together. So you'll add a circle for your lining. And then once you have sewn that outer edge, obviously you need to open this up some way so that you can tie it around your tree. So you'll cut along one of the edges, cut around your opening, and then finish your tree skirt. So again, all the instructions are on the Sulky blog, as well as the Sulky free projects page that I linked to in today's post. I also wanted to mention that this particular tree skirt was quilted with Sulky metallic threads. I know you can use metallic threads for quilting. You just need to make sure you have a 9014 metallic or top stitch needle, and that's going to help you sew this thread with ease. You also might want to grab up some sewer's aid. We talk about this so often that we started carrying it at sulky.com so that people could find it easily. This is a water-soluble lubricant. And what you do is you just put a tiny little dot on your finger, rub your fingers together, and then rub them along the needle where the needle eye is. This will help you not only thread your needle better, but it also helps that metallic thread glide through all of those layers when you are quilting with it or when you're using it for machine embroidery. So this is really great stuff, and a bottle is going to last you a long, long time because you really only need that little dab every time you use it. So, I mean, I've had this bottle for quite some time. I have another one that I keep in my travel sewing kit so that it is always with me, whether I'm doing hand sewing, machine sewing, etc. It helps in a lot of different applications. So anyway, it is quilted with metallic thread, which I think is really cool. All right, this is our second table runner that I wanted to talk to you about. And it's kind of the same concept, but instead of piecing together your wedges with little squares to create that spiral look, you are starting off with wedges already cut. So this is made out of scrap fabric, lots of reds and greens and all those traditional colors. But the back side is a cream fabric with a very small snowflake print on it. Really makes this totally reversible. So one year you can show your scrappy side, and the next year you can flip it over and show your white snowflakey side. So you have options when making it reversible. Now this one is quilted with invisible thread, and I'll show you that in just a second. So here we have all of our wedges cut out. You can see they're all kind of different sizes too, and that's okay because it's scrappy, right? We're making it out of fabric scraps. So cut out all of your wedges and start sewing them together to create your circular tree skirt. Then you're going to kind of square up the edges, making them nice and even, making your circle nice and even so that it goes around your tree skirt, or excuse me, goes around your tree stand nice and flat once you've tied it together. You'll leave one of those wedges unsewn so that, again, you can open up your tree skirt. So now we're going to layer it over a layer of batting and a layer of backing fabric. Additionally, I used a layer of Sulky Soft and Sheer. Soft and Sheer is a permanent cutaway lightweight stabilizer. And this was really helping for the quilting process and giving kind of a layer of interfacing behind that pieced tree skirt top. So I added a layer of soften shear, and for this, you'll probably need to get a bolt of soften shear so that it's wide enough for your tree skirt. Or you can grab up a 1 yard pack, because as you unfold it, it will be wide enough to, span your entire tree skirt. Make sure you have pressed all of your seams either to one side or press them open before adding that soften shear, the batting, and the backing. And now we're going to quilt through all of those layers to secure everything together. And before you do so, make sure to use some Sulky KK2000. This is our temporary spray adhesive, just to make sure that all of your layers are nice and stuck together. With sort of a smaller scale project like this, I don't add any pins when I'm spray basting, but if you're not going to quilt your project in the same sewing session, maybe you're going to secure everything and then come back to it tomorrow when you have some more time to do the actual quilting, totally fine. You can either spray it again, or you can add some pins just for some extra security, or you can spray it and then roll it up and put it inside of a plastic bag that you can seal. That way, your spray adhesive won't dissipate into the air over time, and it'll still be nice and stuck together when you have time to quilt it or finish quilting it. Because the temporary spray adhesive here at Sulky is air soluble. So cool. So it's just going to dissipate over time, about, anywhere between 36 to 48 hours or so. And I really like that about it. It doesn't gum up your needle. It's the most eco-friendly spray adhesive out there. You get more product in a smaller can. There's just less air in the can. So many things are great about it. So at any rate, you want to make sure to spray baste your layers together, and then you can start your quilting. I used invisible thread in the needle and in the bobbin. When you're using invisible thread in the bobbin, you want to really only wind your bobbin about halfway and wind it at a much slower speed. So whether you have a speed control on your machine itself, or you're controlling the speed with your foot while you're winding a bobbin, you just want to go slower. I actually wind the bobbin as slow as it'll go because you just don't want any stretching at all with the thread. Sulky invisible thread is really unique. It is polyester, so you really don't get a lot of that stretching that you might get with a different monofilament thread brand. So it's really unique in that regard. You can press it with high heat. You can wash it. It doesn't have that super crisp feel or hand to it either. So it's a really, really great invisible thread to try. And I just used invisible thread for this because I was quilting in the ditch of all of those wedge seams. And you could certainly quilt this in any way that you like. You could use Sulky 30-weight cotton blendables and do an overall quilting pattern on this. You could free motion along all of the wedges in a little bit different pattern. That would be really pretty. The reason I went with invisible thread is because sometimes while I'm quilting, I can veer off course and off of my ditch or the seam, right? When we're quilting in the ditch, we're sinking our needle into that seam and doing sort of an invisible stitch. So why not use invisible thread? And if you veer off course a little bit, you won't be able to really see it or notice it when you're using invisible thread. So that's kind of why I went with invisible thread for this, but I also wanted the fabric to shine instead of the thread. Sometimes, especially with a scrappy project like this, letting those fabrics really shine is just a choice you can make, but the choice is yours, really. So many different threads to choose from. And yes, I use a 9014 needle when I'm using invisible thread as well. And I take the same precautions that I would when using a metallic thread. I sew slower, and I wind my bobbin at the slowest speed and only about halfway or 3/4 of the way full. All right. Once your quilting is done, you can trim up your tree skirt. Make sure to trim around your hole in the center, and then we're just going to bind it. And to keep things super simple, I went with prepackaged binding. I know, don't crucify me. For the most part, I love making my own bindings, especially if I have scraps left over. I will piece them together and make a scrappy binding for a scrappy quilt or scrappy tree skirt. But for this, I actually had some pre-made binding on hand. So I bound the lower edge, and then I bound my little circle in the center, leaving some tails of binding that I could use to tie my tree skirt around my tree stand. So here you can see I'm kind of going off of the edge, leaving a tail of binding. And then you just sew your binding tail together, and you can either knot or you can fold in and finish the edge, your choice. And here I am using just some Wonder Clips, greatest invention for quilty projects, and showing you how to kind of finish that lower edge of your tree skirt, making sure that all of those ends are tucked in nice and neat so you don't have any raw edges showing of your binding. And here is what the back side looks like. It's kind of hard to see that snowflake print I was talking about. But if you are going to make this reversible, keep that in mind when you're choosing the binding for the project, because obviously you're going to see the binding on the reverse side as well. So if you do a scrappy binding, but you're looking for a more, classic look, I should say, then maybe do a binding that's all one color rather than a scrappy binding, or do a black binding so you can have like a black and white look on one side, and then your black binding kind of goes with your scrappy look as well because it's a nice neutral color. And then this is what the right side looks like as well. And you can see, you can't really see the quilting because it's all done in that invisible thread. All right. And then you'll just wrap it around your tree stand and use the tie to secure it around that center. And then I just have this cute little sign that I put up pretty much every year until the presents start arriving. No peeking, sneaking, or shaking. Pretty cute. It was gifted to me. So at any rate, that's another tree skirt tutorial using your scraps. Now, the last one I'm going to show everybody was kind of an experiment. And even my husband said to me, are people actually going to make this? And I want to prove him wrong because I think people are actually going to make this. And, along with tree skirts, you might be seeing those tree collars everywhere. They are like the thing. I actually got one a couple years ago, and I will even put a tree skirt down almost like a rug, put my tree on top with the tree collar. So the tree skirt is just kind of like peeking out around the collar, and it really hides, if you have, an artificial tree, it really hides all of the bottom parts of the tree in the tree stand really well. So like I have an artificial tree, and even with a tree skirt, you still see some of, the light strings will hang down, or, you got to clean up the edges of the base of the tree. So these tree collars, they're kind of like baskets, or I've seen them made out of like aluminum or hammered aluminum. Those ones are cool. And it stands up and just goes around your tree stand. So I thought, let's make one out of fabric. So I just thought of so many different ways we could do this, braiding fabric together, But how are we going to make it stand? So I just went through so many things in my head, and I came up with this fabric covered cord tree collar. So I'm going to go over the steps of how I made this, and you might be familiar with these fabric covered corded rugs or a fabric covered basket, right? I have a little one like this that I keep all my wonder clips and bobbins and most used tools. And when I get to start sewing, I just put it right next to my machine, and I have all those things right at hand. So you might be familiar with making those. So I thought we'll basically make a fabric covered cord basket, but we have to leave a hole in the top and a hole in the bottom. So how are we going to make this thing stand on its own, right? All right, so I'll show you how I did it. All right, so first off, we need a very strong needle. And I will say I started off, here's some of my remnants. I started off with 1/2 inch wide cording. And because I thought this stuff's really strong and it'll stand on its own, no problem. But your machine is not going to like sewing through this. I tried everything possible. I loosened my presser foot pressure. I used the biggest heavy duty needle I could find. I even tried doing it by hand. I know, right? So then I thought, what if I just use this along the bottom edge and the top edge to kind of trim it out and to give it some structure, something to, hold the smaller cording together. So at any rate, I'll show you how you can get this under your presser foot by sewing smaller cord to it and just using it along that lower edge. You can see it really holds its shape nicely and allows you to create those circles and then have the rest of your tree skirt keep its shape and stand up on its own. All right, so an 80-12 titanium top stitch needle is what I used here. And I chose the 80-12 because I am working with the 30 weight cotton blendables. And traditionally, we have always recommended using a 90-14 top stitch needle or a 90-14 of any kind with the 30 weight thread. But that 90-14 has a larger eye, so it creates a little bit bigger hole. And I found that my machine was kind of struggling with that big size needle when I was sewing that larger cording to my smaller cording that created, the bulk of the tree skirt. So I went down to an 80-12, did some test stitching. The thread performed quite nicely with the 80-12, and that one was the ticket for this project. So 80-12 top stitch titanium needle. The 30 weight blendables thread is what I used because, again, scrappy project. So I'm working with all these different fabric scraps. They don't even have to be holiday themed. I happen to have some on hand, but I paired them with some other solids and some other random prints that kind of coordinated with all of the holiday scraps that I had. Because once you wrap all these around the cord and start sewing, you can't really see the print anyway. So go with a color scheme, dive into your fabric scraps, find all the colors in that color scheme, whether it's a baby print or a dog print or a star print, whatever. Again, you're not really going to be able to see those motifs once you cut your strips and start wrapping them around the cord. So go with the blendables and choose a color variety from the blendables that coordinates with all those fabric strips that you're using. Super fun. Okay, So the machine setting we're going to use is a zigzag stitch. This is how we are going to make sure that our needle is going in one piece of cording on one side and the other piece of cording on the other. That's how we're going to sew our rows of cord together. So a super wide zigzag stitch, a 6.0, and then I did a 4.0 length. If you want more thread, you can go even narrower on your length, shorter rather, on your length, or you could go wider. As long as you are hitting each side of cord with your needle and kind of sewing those together, you can go a little bit wider than the 4.0, but this is what I recommend and what worked best for me. So now we get to sit by the fireside and have a hot cider and start wrapping our cord. So for the 1/2-inch cord, just start wrapping your fabric strips, and you can go with anywhere between like a 1-inch to even like a 3.5 or 4-inch fabric strip, and just start wrapping them. Make sure that you're wrapping at an angle, covering your previous fabric as you go. With the 1/2-inch cording, you don't need nearly as much as you will the smaller 3/16 inch cording, which is also called clothesline. You can grab a 100-foot piece of clothesline. They're relatively inexpensive. I linked directly to it in the blog post of the one that I used. So you'll need 100 feet of cording, and this will be for like an 8-foot tree. I put mine on my little 4-foot tree, and it looks good on that. I also tried it on my 8-foot tree, and it looks good on that. So if you have a much bigger tree with a much bigger base or a larger, larger than standard tree stand, then you'll want to use more cording and make it larger, okay? And all of these instructions, again, are in the Sulky blog, and I link directly to them in today's post as well for your reference. So wrap a bit of the large cording, the 1/2-inch cording, and, just kind of eyeball it. But you certainly don't need to do like 50 feet. Maybe do like 20 feet. And then if you have some extra, that's okay. You can just trim it off as we go along. But the smaller cording, you're going to need to wrap the whole shebang. Like I said, I used 100 feet of cording for the smaller clothesline cording. So just keep wrapping. Now, when you get to an beginning or end of your strip, I just used the Clover Wonder Clips to make sure that my end was nice and secure. You'll overlap the previous end a couple of times, put a little Wonder Clip there, and just keep wrapping. Sometimes I didn't even use a Wonder Clip because you're going to wrap so tightly that it stays together. But just for some extra security and, to make sure nothing unraveled while I was sewing, I went ahead and added a little bit of Wonder Clips as I went along. So at the beginning, you want to leave yourself a tail of fabric that's at least 6 inches long, because what we're going to do is we're going to abut our big cording with our little cording just at the base of the tree skirt, so that we start off with our heavy cording. Then we abut our smaller cording, and we're going to wrap that excess fabric around the join. And it'll look kind of weird when you start off, but as you add rows, it'll kind of smush down and you won't even see where that join is. It sounds weird. It looks weird when you're doing it, but then when you put it around your tree, it all comes together. And if it's super weird, then you can just put that at the back of your tree. Hide it, with an ornament or something like that when you're hanging stuff on the tree. Nobody's going to notice because this is your scrappy basket style tree collar. All right, so now we get to the sewing. And I will say, when you get to the sewing, you will pat yourself on the back and be so excited because it does take quite a good amount of time to wrap all this cording. But it's also very satisfying to get all of these fabric scraps out of the way, and then you can make room for new holiday themed fabrics. Am I right? All right, so as I mentioned, you're gonna abut the different cording widths. You can see it looks kind of minimal in this picture, but on the left, we've got our fat 1/2-inch cording, and on the right, we've got our 3/16 diameter cording or clothesline. So we are going to sew them, making sure you have that join at the beginning. I started away from the join and started sewing in a little ways. Then when I did a full circle, then I stopped the machine, clipped the threads, and finished along that join, and then came back for all my subsequent rotations. So you'll need to measure the diameter of circle that you want for your base. So measure that, make a big loop with your first 1/2-inch wide cording, and that's going to be what we work from. And you want to make sure that the bulk of your tree collar is going to the left of the needle. Okay, so in this picture, I started with my first rotation, and then I flipped everything so that actually, no, I didn't flip anything. That was at the very end. I apologize. You can see I have my heavier cording to the left, which means as I start adding things, that is going to go to the left of the machine, and it's not going to get stuck under the machine arm. That's where I was going with it. You can see I also have a wider presser foot here. That is keeping those layers nice and flat and kind of scrunching them down while we are sewing. You might also find that you need a zipper foot just for the portion. Actually, that doesn't make sense. I retract that because if you used a zipper foot, you wouldn't be able to do the zigzag stitch. So I believe I tried using a zipper foot. I popped it on because I thought, well, then my needle or my presser foot won't be touching that heavy duty cording. And then I thought to myself, no, I have to use a zigzag stitch here. Can't use a zipper foot. All right, at any rate, test and make sure that your right needle swing is going to go into your lighter weight cording, and your left needle swing is going to go into your heavier weight cording. You may need to adjust your needle position, that's what it is, so that your presser foot isn't really coming down on that 1/2-inch wide cording. Because, like I said, your machine won't like it very much. I was able to do it just by shifting over these two pieces of cording, shifting them over to the left, moving my needle position ever so slightly so that I could do the zigzag stitch, and my presser foot was mostly holding the narrower cording. Does that make sense? Is everybody with me? All right. So then you'll really get into the groove of it. See what I'm doing here? All those zigzag stitches going across our 1/4-inch cording, and then we've got the base of our tree skirt all the way to the left. Now it's time to add our heavy cording to our upper edge or the smaller circle, right? So you'll want to measure that too as you're going so you kind of know when to start and stop. But I just sewed, and you kind of stretch it a little bit as you're sewing, especially when you want it to get smaller. And when you get to the top, you'll have a smaller area to work with. Okay. So now we need to add our heavy duty cording to the right side. And can you see how my presser foot is kind of wonky here? That's because that heavier cording is preventing my presser foot from going down all the way. So you'll want to err on the side of caution here and do what's most comfortable for you to do that final trimming. Again, we're going to abut the join, wrap fabric around, and when you get to the end where your larger cording is going to meet, see how I have a nice thread tail going on here, or excuse me, fabric tail? So what I did was I trimmed my cording at the join where it met the join on the previous rotation. And I have lighter or smaller cording meeting where I have trimmed it. So that end is going to kind of be smushed up against where the larger cording began. Does that make sense? It's kind of hard to explain. So I've left a long fabric tail, and I'm going to wrap and wrap and wrap that fabric tail around where I trimmed the cording. And I just kept wrapping to hide the raw edges, or the wrong side of the fabric, really. We've got raw edges all over the place. And then I tucked it up underneath, and I'm just going to like smush it against the previous cording join. So I'm just kind of tucking it up in there. See how it's barely detectable because we're showing off all these raw edges. We got a, rustic chic thing going on. So you just kind of tuck it up, smush it into the join, and continue your zigzag stitches. And that finishes your tree collar. So after I was done with the stitching, I had to do a little bit of shaping to it. Okay, so I put it on my table and I stretched the upper and lower heavy cording, just pulled it apart a little bit along the entire, all the edges of the tree collar. And that really started to stand it up on its own. And then I just let it sit for a few hours, and it really took on a great shape. And here is where you can actually manipulate it to be a circle or an oval. So if you want an oval shape, if your tree kind of goes against a wall and you don't have that room for a nice round circular tree skirt, you can leave it as an oval and kind of, shape it that way. And that's kind of cool as well. You don't see that sitting on the shelves at your big box store, right? An oval tree collar. So you can just kind of shape it how you want. You can even spray it with a little bit of liquid stabilizer if you want, which is really going to stiffen it up and make it nice and stand on its own. To make your liquid stabilizer, you can use some scraps of sulky solvy, put them in a spray bottle, fill it maybe 2/3 of the way with water until all that stabilizer dissolves, and just give it a little bit of spray around the outside and inside edge. Shape it to where you want and let it dry. I didn't do that, but you certainly could do that if you're finding that yours isn't standing up quite as proudly as you want. But mine is on my, mine is waiting to go on my tree right now, or under my tree rather, and it has held up quite nicely exactly how you see here. So to put this around your tree, what you'll want to do is set up your tree stand, then put your tree collar over it, then insert your tree inside. It's as simple as that. So I thought this was a really cute and crafty idea. And again, ways to offload those scrap fabrics and still make something cool out of them. This just really has a cute, kind of country-ish, rustic Christmas feel to it. I found some wool pom-pom trim that I put on the tree, which I think just kind of goes with it so nicely. I love some pom-poms. So I hope you guys give it a try. Even if you have maybe smaller trees that you put by your fireplace or in a centerpiece on your table, if you have those little trees, you could go smaller in scale and do something like this basket for the tree skirt, and just make sure to leave yourself that hole so that you can put your tree inside. So you don't have to make a massive one. And, for people asking, oh my gosh, how long did that actually take? I would say maybe about 6 hours, but I definitely didn't do this all in one sitting. One day I did all the cording wrapping. One day but I also had to do some experimenting too to find out the best way to execute this. And you all won't have to do that because I've done all of that hard work for you. So you won't have the time it takes to do that. But this is a great thing to get the kids involved in as well. If you have kids for Thanksgiving break this week, make them go in your scrap bin and find all kinds of cool fabrics that go together, or tell them, hey, find everything that's green in this box. And then, you can either rip them into strips, or you can have them cut them into strips. And meanwhile, you can start wrapping the cording and make it kind of an activity and something that they can do with you as well. So, it was fun for me to figure out how to make this and to come up with the tutorial. So I hope you all enjoy. And you can head on over to the Sulky blog and get all the instructions, everything that I did to put this together. It's nice and organized, and it's probably easier to follow on that blog because it is a little difficult to explain. But if you've ever made these rugs or made these baskets, it's just kind of a cool take on it. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope that you give it a try. And if you do, be sure to please take a photo, send it to us. You can send it to info@sulky.com and just tell us that you made the covered rope tree skirt, and here's an image of it. Or you can also join our Facebook group. Our Facebook group is called Sulky Stitch and Post. And if you're not a part of it already, I recognize a lot of your names. If you're not a part of it already, all you have to do is search for Sulky Stitch and Post and ask to join. And then once we, allow you to join, you'll have this private Facebook group where you can talk amongst each other and post pictures of your projects. You can ask us questions directly on that page. We're on it all the time, monitoring it. So it's a great place to come together and get, answers to your questions. Deals and steals specifically for that group are posted every once in a while. So there's lots of fun to be had over there at Sulky Stitch and Post. All right. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you're getting your stretchy pants out so you have room to grow after the big meal. If you're a football fan, this is a great weekend for that as well. So the holidays are starting, and it's really exciting. In the coming weeks, I'll be having lots more holiday tutorials, great gift ideas, in the hoop projects, all kinds of fun. So be sure to tune in next week for another So What? And we can all commiserate about the big meals and family gatherings that we had. And I can't wait to hear about yours. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Enjoy your weekend with friends and family. And I'll see you next week for another So What?